For centuries, whispers have drifted through the corridors of power. Whispers of a man who wears no papal crown, yet commands influence rivaling the Pope himself. He is not seated upon the papal throne of Rome, nor is his name sung in public prayers. And yet, in the minds of many, his shadow stretches across continents and centuries. He is known not by his birth name, but by a title that inspires awe, suspicion, and fascination, the Black Pope. The title does not speak of skin color, but of symbolism, of authority cloaked in shadow, of intellect wrapped in discipline. It refers to the superior general of the Society of Jesus, better known as the Jesuit order, one of the most powerful, educated, and strategically brilliant institutions in the history of the Catholic Church. Founded in 1540, the Jesuits were soldiers of God, teachers, explorers, and missionaries who carried faith and knowledge to every corner of the world. From royal courts to distant jungles, their mark endured, and with that mark came rumor, resentment, and myth. To understand the legend of the Black Pope, we must trace the Jesuits' rise from the spiritual chaos of 16th century Europe through empires, revolutions, and wars to the modern world, where faith and conspiracy still intertwine. Europe in the early 1500s trembled under reform and rebellion. The Protestant Reformation shattered a millennium of Catholic unity. Luther's theses echoed like cannon fire. Monarchs seized monasteries, and cities divided by creed. Amid this upheaval, a wounded soldier, Inigo Lopez de Loyola, later known as Saint Ignatius, lay broken after battle. Confined to bed, he reached not for a sword, but for scripture. What began as boredom became revelation. The warrior envisioned a new kind of army, one that would fight heresy not with steel, but with intellect, discipline, and devotion. Gathered 6 companions in Paris, men of faith and learning, and in 1534 they took vows of poverty, chastity, obedience, and loyalty to the Pope. Thus was born the Society of Jesus. When Pope Paul III approved the order in 1540, Ignatius became its first superior general. The Jesuits soon earned a reputation as God's soldiers, spiritual commandos trained to defend the faith through reason, rhetoric, and relentless service. Unlike other orders, the Jesuits built a structure resembling a military command. At the top stood the superior general, elected for life, answerable only to the Pope. Below him stretched provinces and missions across Europe, Asia, Africa, and the New World. Every Jesuit reported upward through this living web, sending letters and intelligence to Rome. Ignatius demanded strict obedience, tempered by reason. His spiritual exercises forged minds that could question yet remain devoted, intellect bound by faith. Observers that the superior general's quiet authority seemed to rival even that of the Pope. And because Jesuits wore black robes while the pontiff wore white, a new name was whispered: the Black Pope, the power behind the throne. The Society of Jesus became Rome's spearhead against Protestantism. Jesuit preachers debated reformers. Jesuit confessors guided kings. Jesuit scholars refined doctrine. Under Generals Diego Lainez and Claudio Acquaviva, the order built hundreds of schools. Their ratio studiorum blended theology with humanism, Latin, philosophy, mathematics, and the arts, training eloquent, logical leaders. By 1600, their schools stretched from Lisbon to Lima, from Rome to Goa. They educated princes and poets, shaping the minds that would shape nations. Their war was not of destruction, but of persuasion, and in many ways, they succeeded, restoring Catholic strength across Europe. While Europe argued over doctrine, Jesuit explorers carried faith to the edges of the known world. In China, Matteo Ricci donned silk robes and debated Confucian scholars. In Japan, Francis Xavier preached among samurai. In Paraguay, Jesuits built organized indigenous towns, reductions, where faith and culture coexisted. Their letters poured into Rome from 5 continents. Maps, languages, and discoveries that reshaped Europe's understanding of the world. To some, this was genius. To others, espionage. By the 1600s, Jesuits were confessors to kings and tutors to princes. Their subtle influence stirred admiration and suspicion. Critics claimed they manipulated monarchs and plotted behind the Vatican's veil. The Enlightenment turned rumor into hostility. Voltaire mocked them as men too obedient for freedom. Eventually, kings across Europe expelled them, fearing their loyalty to Rome. In 1773, under pressure from monarchs, Pope Clement XIV dissolved the order. Jesuit schools closed, their missions vanished. The Black Pope's throne seemed empty at last. But shadows are the Jesuits' element. Protected by Prussia and Russia, lands outside papal reach, the remnants of the society endured. They preserved their rules, teachings, and missions quietly, waiting for history's tides to shift once again. What the world thought dissolved still pulsed beneath the surface, invisible but alive. When Pope Pius VII restored the society in 1814, it was as if a ghost stepped back into daylight. Jesuits returned to classrooms and pulpits, not with vengeance, but with purpose. They rebuilt patiently, with minds sharper and missions clearer. To their friends, it was divine providence. To their enemies, proof that they had never truly left. A secret rebirth hidden in plain sight. The 19th century became their proving ground. They rebuilt schools, universities, and observatories. Their pens replaced their swords, and their words rebuilt bridges that centuries of conflict had burned. Through patient teaching and scientific study, they reminded the world that faith and reason were not enemies, but allies. Jesuit scholars produced maps, dictionaries, and research that shaped both theology and science. In a rapidly industrializing world, they spoke softly of balance between progress and morality, between ambition and conscience. Their classrooms produced thinkers who would guide nations, explorers who would chart the world, and scientists who would look to the stars. Yet as their influence grew, so did suspicion. How could any group so united, so disciplined, remain untouched by worldly ambition? The myth of the Black Pope deepened again, now not just a ruler in shadow, but a master of minds, a whisperer behind civilization itself. The 20th century arrived with wars unlike any before. The Jesuits were scattered across continents divided by ideology. 2 world wars, fascism, and communism shattered nations, yet still they stood. In silence, they aided prisoners, sheltered refugees, and wrote journals of courage under fire. Father Alfred Delp wrote his final words in a Nazi cell, refusing to renounce his faith before execution. In Eastern Europe, priests faced exile and imprisonment under totalitarian regimes. Even in persecution, they refused to surrender their mission, to think, to teach, to serve. To some, their endurance was proof of secret power. To others, proof of divine favor. But their silence was often mistaken for control, their strength for conspiracy. Every time the world broke, the Jesuits emerged again, not with banners, but with books. The myth of the Black Pope was never stronger than in moments when truth was quiet. Pedro Arup, elected Superior General in 1965, embodied a new kind of leadership, a reformer for a restless age. The Second Vatican Council had redrawn the boundaries of faith, and Arup guided the Jesuits through it with courage and compassion. He spoke not of dominance, but of service. Under his guidance, the society became a movement of intellect and justice, blending ancient discipline with modern purpose. They built hospitals, universities, and missions that reached the forgotten and the poor. He called for a faith that does justice, for love that demands action. Admirers called him prophetic, critics called him dangerous. His compassion was mistaken for politics, his reform for revolution. Once again, admiration and fear walked side by side. And in that tension, the legend of the Black Pope found fresh air, reborn through misunderstanding. As television and later the internet conquered imagination, the myth entered its most powerful form, the digital age. No longer whispered in monasteries, it now spread through documentaries, blogs, and conspiracy forums. The Jesuit general became the hidden hand of global finance, the unseen ruler of the Vatican, the mastermind behind governments. The myths multiplied, echoing through screens and wires. Yet, behind the noise, the truth remained simple. The superior general governed 15,000 men of faith across 100 nations. His authority was spiritual, not imperial. His reach born of education, not empire. Still, a world that feared chaos preferred the illusion of control. The myth endured, pixel by pixel, because imagination feeds where certainty starves. Today's Jesuits live not in fortresses, but in classrooms, clinics, and communities. They run universities, build hospitals, and train generations to think critically and act compassionately. From Georgetown to Nairobi, from Manila to Madrid, the Jesuit seal marks places of inquiry and service. Their empire is one of minds, not borders. Their conquest, not of land, but of ignorance. Yet people still see their discipline, their silence, their order, and mistake it for secrecy. But their truth is far more humble. Men bound by vows older than empires, guided by faith deeper than suspicion. The myth lingers, but the mission remains. Understand, serve, and enlighten. When Pope Francis, the first Jesuit pope, rose to the papacy in 2013, the whispers returned louder than ever. Now, for the first time, both the white pope and the black pope came from the same spiritual brotherhood. To some, it was a sign of prophecy. To others, proof of power. But Francis's humility revealed something else, a harmony of intellect and compassion. His leadership reflected the Jesuit ideal, faith in motion, love in practice. The world saw no empire, no secret rule, only a man seeking peace through simplicity. The black and white robes, once symbols of contrast, now stood together as mirrors of balance. The Jesuits' real legacy has never been about domination. It has always been about understanding. For centuries, they have pursued truth through education, philosophy, and faith, believing that knowledge and morality must walk hand in hand. They taught that every question leads closer to God, and every discovery reveals His design. Their influence stretches across continents, shaping modern thought, diplomacy, and ethics. But the paradox remains. The very qualities that made them enlightened, discipline, intellect, loyalty, also made them feared. The myth persists because people fear what they cannot define. The Jesuit order became the mirror of mankind's unease, our awe of intellect, our fear of invisible influence. Each generation creates its own villains of intellect. The Jesuits have long filled that role, too silent, too organized, too wise. When people cannot explain complexity, they invent control. The myth of the Black Pope survives not because it is true, but because it comforts those who need a simple answer for a complicated world. Yet beneath that myth lies something real, the power of knowledge itself. The Jesuits' strength was never in secrecy, but in education. Their influence did not conquer, it enlightened. The legend thrives not through evidence, but through fascination. Through exile and persecution, through revolution and reform, the Jesuits endured because their kingdom was never of this world. It was of the mind. They built an empire of reason that outlived monarchs and outlasted tyrants. Their power lay not in crowns, but in conviction, not in wealth, but in wisdom. Today, as technology replaces parchment and whispers travel as algorithms, the myth still walks beside them. Yet those who listen closely can hear the truth within the story. The Jesuits' strength is not domination, but devotion. Their legacy is not control, but comprehension. Their empire, not secret, only silent. And so, as centuries turn and knowledge becomes the new faith, the whispers continue, not in cathedrals or palaces, but in classrooms, libraries, and the hearts of those still seeking to understand. The Black Pope remains, not as a ruler in darkness, but as a symbol of how faith and reason intertwine, of how knowledge can illuminate even the deepest shadow. For in every whisper of power lies a fragment of truth, and in every legend, a memory of light. For centuries, humanity has searched for meaning in the shadows. Some stories fade into legend. Others whisper across time, waiting for someone to listen. The tale of the Black Pope reminds us that truth and myth often walk side by side, that knowledge can illuminate even the darkest halls of history. What began in secrecy has become a mirror, reflecting who we are and what we choose to believe. Some truths are not lost, only waiting to be found. This has been Whisper of History 12, where history speaks through the silence. If you've been moved by the story, don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave your thoughts in the comments below. Your voice keeps the whispers of history alive. Until next time, listen closely, for the past is never truly gone.